Should you let players be able to skip making a charisma skill check if they simply roleplay the situation well enough? I got about a dozen comments of people saying that's exactly what they do, so it made me sit down and consider whether or not that is actually the best option. Let's put this situation in game terms. Your players are trying to convince the king to give them a second chance. The DC that you have in mind for this check is 20. If one of your players prior to rolling, or even after, gives such a good speech in real life at the table, would you let them succeed regardless of what their role is? I've certainly done it over the years, but after consideration, I don't really think that's such a good idea. Let me clarify, I don't think that's such a good idea for all types of games. If you're wanting your game to be a simulation, then yeah, determining success based off of how well your players vocalize their charisma checks makes sense. But if you're wanting to run a type of game where players can live out a fantasy, can play a character very different from who they are in real life, can explore possibilities and realities outside of what they live all the time, then it's probably actually not the best approach. Let's assume you're wanting to run the second type of game. A game where players can play someone totally different from who they actually are in reality. Crazy idea. Now, for the purposes of this thought experiment, to illustrate why I think this is a poor idea, we're going to focus on two hypothetical players. Chloe, who is very confident and charismatic in real life, and Darius, who is very shy and less confident in real life. Which of these two players is going to need the most help from the game and from the table to play a charismatic character? Darius, the one who isn't charismatic or confident or bold in real life. If players always face the same DC for a charisma check regardless of how charismatic they as players are, then both Chloe and Darius are on even playing fields as players. But if we reward real-life roleplay by allowing the player to sometimes face a lower DC or even skip the challenge altogether, then Chloe has a severe advantage when it comes to charisma situations in the game. If I, as the DM, allow players to succeed without a check or succeed with a lower DC because they gave a really good speech in real life, who am I rewarding? Chloe. She's going to do this best most often out of the two players. So who am I punishing? Darius, the player who already was shy and needed the most help playing a charismatic character. So this system of reward that I have put in place, in fact, keeps Darius from doing as well playing a charismatic character as Chloe simply because he isn't as good at that in real life. And personally, that's not the type of game I want to run. Don't get me wrong, I like rewarding great roleplay, but there are ways to do that other than allowing someone to auto-succeed without having to roll a die because they gave a good speech. Like awarding advantage or luck points. The idea of letting players succeed simply because they roleplay the charisma check very well, in fact, could easily result in a PC who is bad at charisma checks succeeding more often than a PC who is good at charisma checks because the player is more confident and better spoken in real life. Let's take Chloe and Darius again. Chloe is outspoken and confident in real life, so she didn't really care to make a character like that. So her character has a 10 charisma and a +0 to persuasion. Darius, on the other hand, wanted to play someone different from him, someone who could articulate his thoughts beautifully, and so he gave himself a 20 charisma and has a +8 to persuasion. Now let's say they're both trying to succeed on a DC 18 persuasion check. Darius, with his +8, has a little better than a 50% chance of succeeding, while Chloe, with her +0, has to roll an 18 or higher on the die, so 15% chance. But as soon as we start allowing Chloe to automatically succeed or face a lower DC because she can articulate her thoughts and her speech very well at the table, that calculus changes. In fact, it's possible that Chloe's character could succeed at charisma checks with her +0 more often than Darius's with his +8, simply because she's better at this in real life. The system of allowing her to avoid checks allows her to use an in-real-life skill to avoid the risk and probability of the dice. Darius doesn't really have that option. I know people are going to say, of course he does, he could do well, but in this hypothetical, we are focusing on two extremes. Chloe, who is an incredible speaker, and Darius, who has intense problems speaking confidently in front of others in real life. In fact, after thinking about it, I've come to the decision that if you want to run your game this way and allow players to avoid roles and succeed simply based off of how well they verbalize it in real life, you'd be better off simply removing all social mechanics from the game entirely. There are lots of systems out there that have next to no and sometimes no social rules. What happens is simply based off of what seems fitting for the narrative. And those systems are totally fine. But in a system like Dungeons & Dragons that does have a social mechanic, albeit pretty limited, the players can invest their limited resources in becoming good at charisma. And again, it would suck to invest all of this limited resource in becoming a charismatic character only to be out-charismaed by someone who is simply better at that in real life. So it might be better simply to remove that aspect from the game entirely so players don't waste that limited resource in charisma. Simply have it go off of what's good for the narrative and what makes sense if you want to go about it that way. But if you're going to continue using a system that has mechanics and rules for social interaction, I think those should rule. That's why I'm a huge proponent of generally tell me what you're wanting to accomplish with your charisma check, then role play out your result. If Chloe's character gets a natural 1 on her charisma check, I want her to role play out that low result. And if Darius gets very high on his charisma check, I would love for him to role play out that high check. But you know what? If he can't, if he's feeling too shy, if he's not feeling confident enough to do it at the table, he still succeeds because the dice control. He still gets to succeed at something with his character that he can't necessarily in real life. And isn't that part of the fun of these games in the first place? So, these are just my thoughts on this topic. What are yours?